Board games, it's what we're talking about. And there, that's James, it's who we're meeting today. James is a person who likes to play some board games. I don't know if every day James might play a board game. I don't know. But maybe today James will go and play a board game, maybe online, because that is a symptom of our times. James has made a game you could call great. It is a game that's called Magnate. James successfully funded it. Maybe one day it will be a hit, because it's not out yet, so it's a bit soon to say. But we're going to look forward to the day where we'll have more board games. Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games and meeting James Naylor. I'm not gonna shout. Hey, good morning.
Morning. Oh, what? That is just fantastic. The improvised song making just keeps getting better and better. I'm so unbelievably impressed.
Thank you very much. And I am Bez. We are blethering in some manner about board games. And, you know, it might be breakfast time, it might be bedtime where you are, it might be all sorts of times, because, you know, people are watching sometimes from around the world. But wherever you are, if you want to take a bath, you know, it's a suitable time for a bath, probably. It's up to you. And so that's why this is a busy bath time board game bladder. And today we are going to be meeting James Naylor. I mean, I say coming up today, but, you know, we've already met you. That feels like, you know, that could be the end of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I should just go now then. I'll just disappear.
I mean, I really... Wait a minute. What I realize is that this entire show was misnamed. I should be calling these Getting to Know James Naylor, but then that's a bit long for the start. And a quick hello to Rita Model. It is lovely to have you with us.
Hello, Rita.
And hello, Rob. And
hey, Rob, how's it going?
Matthew Dunstan. It is lovely to have you.
Hey, Matt.
So many amazing faces this morning. And yeah, today there's no real topic. So we're going to talk about, you know, what makes James tick and what James enjoys. Let's talk about some games that James loves. Let's talk a little bit about James' design history and lessons learned and what's been going on along the way. But first of all, you know what we're going to do is we are going to be talking about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So to everyone in the comments, I encourage you to share what have you been enjoying in the past day or so since I last saw you. I mean, if I've never seen you before, then yeah, what have you been enjoying recently? Because yeah, life isn't always the best, but we can find wee things to appreciate. Have you got any recent highlights that you would like to share, James?
Oh, okay. So recent highlights that that of things that have happened recently. I think the biggest recent highlight for me, and it's not exactly that recent because it's been something that's happening all over the period of this slightly challenging period, I guess, for me, has been discovering a campaign war game with my dad. So he and he lives in a flat that's actually really close to mine, and we kind of form a bubble together. And what we play every Sunday after a Sunday roast is we play Memoir 44. And I've always loved, I'm big into history, so I was really interested to play a historical war game, but had never actually really played any of those. As a teenager, I was, like many people, really into Warhammer, and I played that kind of thing, but nothing that was like a kind of more historical theme thing. And over the last, well, I guess 9 months now, we've ended up playing, I think, something like 24 or 25 different scenarios in this game, because almost every Sunday we will meet up and then we will, and then we will play this game. And it's just been a really lovely experience. Like, playing a game with someone who, obviously he supports me a lot, so he will often play games, but he's not that interested really in board games in general, right? So but being able to play something with him that I know, because he loves history, that he'll really get into, has just been really, really delightful. So for me, I think discovering that as a genre and as a way of playing for such a long period of time, and spending time with my dad, sharing, you know, love of history, has been absolutely freaking awesome. So for me, that's been my recent highlight of something I think I've really valued this year, which actually, ironically, only came about because of what has happened. So I think I'm going to take that's a strong take of positive from it for me.
That is, yeah, as Matthew says, it's a lovely tale of, you know, that's what games are all about, bringing people together with a shared value of, you know, love of history or a respect for each other's, you know, passions. And yeah, that does sound super awesome. Matthew has been enjoying Marks and Spencer's mince pies, and apparently those ones were particularly good. Rita's been enjoying the Grand Carnival. I've not played that game. Have you played this one?
No, not one I'm aware of. I'll have to Google it.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out myself. So feel free to share a wee bit more about it. But I myself, I was trying to share some pictures, but for some reason my share screen is not completely working. As in it's not showing the Discord, but I'll just have to paint a picture. Imagine myself sitting at a table with Christian Hacker Hearn, who is a sort of non-binary presenting person, white, with long hair, and we are together playing 3 games of Bidel, which is a lovely game, lots of fun. And then we played a game of Invisible. These are the 2 games for the LDEC design contest that I'm going to send off to, you know, anyone who's willing to help judge. Basically, these are the 2 games. We've determined that one of these 2 games is basically almost certainly going to win. And we had a long chat about it. Then I went over for a wee bit of a social, because I'm in a... Layla is one of those people, like I've been seeing basically 3 people since March. Chris, who comes over, McCall, who is Chris's partner, which, like, if someone's coming over for work, well, I might as well be seeing the person that they're sleeping with, you know, in terms of viral infection. It doesn't make any difference.
It's not going to make any difference either way.
And Layla is like the one person outside of the house that have kind of gotten to see. And with Layla, we played a few games of Invisible, which again is quite a slow, thinky deduction. It's really brain burning. It's almost like, wow, more than I expected anyone to be making. A more complex game than I ever expected from the LDEC. But then we played 2 games of Point Salad, which is always a nice mixture of chaos. And also, I just want to share, imagine a beautiful white kitty opening its jaw with teeth piercing, and hopefully I'll be able to share that picture tomorrow.
Fantastic.
But a quick hello to Nicholas. It's lovely to... Wait, why is that? There we go. Hello, Nicholas. It's lovely to see you. And Rob got to have a first play of a new design with squirrels. Is that the one with Dave Mortimer? And we also watched the first couple of episodes of the new season of The Expanse. That sounds awesome. Oh, and hello, Elaine. It's lovely to see you. Who is sad that Anderson Dawes isn't in it. And yeah, so that is our recent highlights and achievements. Do you have anything more to share, James?
Oh, think about other recent achievements. Not at the moment, I think. I'm very pleased with how things are going with Magnate at the moment, which you've worked into the song, which is so awesome. That's very good. And I did make some... I'm very pleased with how the wallets in the game have come out, particularly in the sample, which is really cool. So they look really... I think they look very... I'm just so pleased that they look...
Do you want to show us?
Realistic? Yes, I can show you. So the idea was originally they just had like different coloured symbols for different companies in the game, because you're not a player colour in this game. You're a property company. And we had this stretch goal in the campaign where we decided what we would do is we would write a biography for each company, a company history. So we could create logos based on what those companies are like. and we ended up coming with a whole set of different personalities. So you've got like one which is called this one's called Greyfield, because it's sort of giant kind of faceless global property company that's sort of slightly maybe you're not quite sure exactly what they do. They all these different businesses. And then another one which has a very Silicon Valley name of Your Home, which is supposed to be like all friendly and lovely like a milkshake, and we create these logos, and it was really cool because we ended up with these different designs that reflected very different kinds of company, and we could write quite fun backstories that are a bit satirical about each one, which was really amusing. And I'm really pleased that then what you end up with is these wallets where you actually hold your money in them like this, that have a kind of leather effect in them as well. So I'm really pleased with that, because I think that will actually be just really effective for holding people's paper money during the game. They look really good, and they reinforce that brand identity, which has a little bit of backstory in the back of the rule book as well, which I think should be quite fun, poking fun at the kind of different kinds of company involved in property.
Well done. And a quick hello to... Sorry, I'm getting a wee bit... Sorry about that. I had a wee bit of an echo. A quick hello to Xate. I hope you are really excellent. I did rewrite the rules to Bidl, which is there. I'm going to write the rules to more games later on. But yeah, I hope that lots of love. I hope that the week picks up for you. I hope that you, I know it can be a difficult time of year, but yeah, lots of love through the ether. And so let's move on to something that hopefully a lot of us can appreciate, which is a brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant?
Okay, so the thing that I thought I wanted to talk about very briefly is actually going to be, I think, about what I think the thing is for me is Christmas decorations. Because I recently put those up. I was having not a great day about a week ago, and was feeling a little bit down about things. I think obviously, with a lot of like restrictions increasing, the days are so short at the moment. Like, it's not, depending on what what one's issue is, it's not a great backdrop, I think, in many ways, that kind of landscape. And because realistically, almost no one's going to come around here, so no one's going to see any decorations I could put up. I was having the thought, well, don't bother putting anything up, because if you don't bother putting anything up, no one's going to see it. What's the point this year? What's the point this year doing it? And then I thought about it, and I was like, actually, you know what? It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something that actually, for me, and I know this can be quite a tough time of year for people in general, but for me would remind me of Christmases past that I used to really enjoy with family, some of whom have now passed on. And that it was actually a bit of a kindness to myself to actually put them up anyway. And the moment I did it, and I had my little plastic tree up, and even with just a little bit of tinsel and a couple of little baubles on it, that for me transformed things like enormously. And I don't matter what the decoration is. You could make something from scratch. And actually, it might be even cooler if you made something from scratch, and even more feel even more. What's the right way to put it? To have even more meaning, I think. But that actually just putting something up that's a sort of a celebration of a moment that's supposed to be about a moment of, I think, love and bringing family together is actually just a really positive thing. And I think when I did that, I just suddenly felt much better. And now every day when I see it, it like cheers me up a little bit. So I think that's the brilliant thing for me recently, has been doing that. And I think even if it doesn't feel like it would be worth the effort because other people aren't going to see it normally, I think it is worth the effort for oneself. That's my recent brilliant thing.
I really like that kind of the notion of doing things for yourself. And yeah, a quick bye to Elaine, lovely to have you, and a quick hello to Alex, who just popped in. But yeah, the notion of Christmas decorations, I know that my mum, quite often doesn't have the energy for a big tree, but likes to do something. So it'll be like, okay, have you seen my Christmas tree? Which will be like, a plant that's already there anyway, just a house plant, and then putting one piece of tinsel on it. Yeah. It's like a small gesture, but it kind of makes you feel, okay, Christmas has arrived. There's something here. I mean, in the house where I currently live, I'm not going to lie, we have a couple of Christmas decorations literally all year round. There's a wreath on one of the doors, and there's a star, little spangly star, because these things look pretty, and why not have them up all year round if you want?
Well, if you don't have to put it away, you don't have to put it back up again. I'd say that's a life hack. That's
I mean, it's a question of whether you enjoy it or not. I mean, as you say, it's not just about what's there and who's coming over. It's about doing these things for yourself. And I really appreciate that sentiment. If anyone else has anything nice to say about Christmas decorations, then now is the moment. Otherwise, we are going to get to our next regularly scheduled section, which is, of course, what I'm starting to believe is the people's favorite. It is time for questionably quick questions.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay, you're in the hot seat.
Suddenly I'm in the hot seat.
Okay, so James, where exactly are you? Be as specific as you can. You don't need to give away your door number or anything. But where exactly are you?
I'm currently in my office / workout room / general crap room on the 31st floor of the building that I live in Croydon. Currently, it's at my standing desk and staring across towards central London right now, where I'm looking over at a rather nice view. That's where I am very exactly, and that's exact as I can really afford to be.
Yes, understood. I mean, I'm not asking for your exact postcode. Also, like, what time is it? You are based in the same time zone as me. Like, you're just a few miles down the road.
Exactly. We are probably how far probably are apart? I reckon we're about 14 or 15 miles, maybe a bit more apart right now.
I think there's a bit more than that.
Oh, it's a bit more than that. Oh.
I'm fairly sure, like, look, for me, it's 10 miles just to get to Royal Festival Hall. So it'll probably be another 10 miles to get to you.
Oh, yeah, maybe more like 20 then. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it's getting to the point of, going to Croydon is a real significant trek for me. Like, if I were living in, are you willing to give me the first 3 letters of your postcodes in public, or is that a bit too much?
Absolutely. Well, this is so fun fact, because I'm full of these kind of fun facts. Is that actually the postcode is CR0, which is the only postcode in the country that begins with that has a 0 in it rather from 1.
Ooh.
And is also I think it might be the country's largest postcode by population as well. So there are something like 130,000 people that live in CR0. So, or maybe even more than that. So I think that one is, so you can definitely know that piece of information. And the reason for that is because the modern postcode system was actually first trialed in Croydon, where it was thought it would begin with and was originally based on CRO for Croydon, CRO rather than 0. And then when they decided to convert everything to 2 letters and a number, they decided to let Croydon, for simplicity's sake, to go from a 0, from an O to a 0, because it would confuse the local people less, and hence we have this rather unique postcode. So there's a very obscurest postal system fact for you.
I really like this, and apparently, according to Google Maps, it would take me 2 hours to cycle over.
Wow.
I mean, that's if I don't stop, assuming I don't get tired, which I'm going to say, right now, my legs are not quite as fit as they were a year ago. But, hopefully I can build back up to that. But, when things are a wee bit better, maybe I'll pop over.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you do. That would be marvelous.
Excellent. So, next question. What is one or more of your favorite games?
Oh, that's always the killer question, isn't it? So one or more of my favorite games. So one of my favorite games recently, at least, has been Everdell, that I've played quite a bit recently. And the reason for that is because I really like its solo mode. And there's something just so calm and restful about looking at all this Andrew Bosley artwork of anthropomorphic animals building a little village. That there's something just very, it's difficult to feel too down about things when you're just like playing this thing of like, yeah, this is just so charming. And I like the fact that its solo mode is like a nice blend of enough surprise and random chance that you aren't just solving a puzzle and that you have to keep reapplying different tactical thinking each time, but also enough predictability in the system that means that you are genuinely solving a problem rather than just interacting with random chance. And that's a really hard balance to get right in the games that I've played that are like solo board games. And solo board games have got, again, another thing that I've discovered a bit in the last few months, because to be honest, I get hooked on computer games really easily and can suddenly find, I mean, this experience a lot of people have, but I find myself like suddenly have spent 4 hours sitting in front of the computer playing Civilization, and I'm like, oh dear, I actually meant to do something else with my day. What's happened? And solo board games are like, if like, I don't know, if solo computer games are a bit like eating ice cream, where it's so sweet and you keep wanting more and more of it the more you have. Solo board games are a little bit like what's the right way to describe it? They're more like a really filling meal where you've had one and you're like, I'm done now. That was nice. I've had like I don't know what it was, steak and chips. I've got no idea what I would compare to exactly. But after the end of it, it's like, well, that was good, but I don't want lots more of it immediately. And I think that's actually a very positive quality, because one of the things I'm increasingly worried about in digital design is it's very easy. There's like a whole science now of like how you manipulate people into constantly playing things over and over again, often not to their benefit. So that's one reason I like solo board games. So Everdell would be one game. These are absolutely not quick answers, so apologies.
Sure. I mean, there is a reason why it says questionably quick.
That's the questionable bit. Exactly. You ask difficult questions, inevitably quick to ask, but long answers. So Everdell would definitely be one that I really enjoy. One that I've played again recently, I increasingly get a chance to play every so often, is Eon's End, which I really like as well. I think that's an enormously clever game about kind of co-op deck builder that I think is the more I play it is really awesome. I'm trying to persuade my colleague Jaya, who's the lead developer for Magnate, to at some point let me be his buddy to play Aeon's End Legacy with, because obviously feels like choosing a legacy game buddy is now, it's quite a decision. It's like okay, who am I going to commit to playing sort of this game with? So that I'm hoping he'll pick me to play this with. Yeah, exactly, right. So so that I think is really cool. And then the other one would be what the other thing I've played recently that one of my favorites. The old favorite for me, the thing that kind of got me into modern games. So that would be Railroad Tycoon, now known as Railways of the World, which is a kind of Martin Wallace train game. I love trains, but actually I think it's sort of brutal auction competition. It's massive map of the US, of the United States of America. They're just building railway lines between places, delivering goods. It's just that's just catnip for me. So that would be my third pick, if I can have three. Nice. I don't know.
Yeah, you can have as many as you want. Nicholas says Everdell is nice. Have you tried any of the expansions? For example, Spirecrest.
I haven't, but it's very interesting that Nicholas asked that question, because I was just down at the Ludicrous, which I think is still open. I think even now for buying games. I saw all the Everdell expansions, and I was like, oh, that's very tempting just to buy them all right now. Particularly, I'd be really interested to know if Nicholas has played the solo mode, if the solo Spirecrest is good, because I've heard some mixed comments about some of the expansions. Yeah, I would like to try those, because at the moment that's definitely pretty. I could definitely justify that, I think, as a buy if it had a good solo variant for it.
Rob asks, would you rather be a Magnate or Magneto?
A Magnate. So I think a Magnate would be great, because a Magnate would presumably be someone with probably quite a lot of funds that I could then put into other things. Whether that be, it could be board games, it could be charitable work, it could be anything else that I want to fund, really. And I think magnets are generally quite useful for people. I think I feel quite comfortable as a business to be in the magnating business. But Magneto, I think that might fulfill some power fantasies, I guess, being able to move cars with your mind, that kind of thing, I guess. But I do wonder that, would it go to my head having all of that power over metal?
Yeah, would you adopt the psychology of Magneto? Would you become like, intent on destroying all the, boring old humans?
Oh God, yeah, that might happen, mightn't it? I might become a sort of I might sort of become, yes, rather than the Charles Xavier approach of trying to live alongside normal people, I have this idea that you've got to replace them somehow in some sort of way that becomes quite violent. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Well, I think that is an interesting question about what power does to people. So I'd hope that I wouldn't change, but I think that would be the biggest risk about being Magneto. Although it would be really fun to make things levitate.
It could be a risk of being a Magnate's Magnate for that. I mean, you could let all the money go to your head. Who knows?
Well, I mean, if you were like, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, there's the comic book series where there's like a parallel universe version that allows them to tell a different story with the same character. I think it's got a technical name, but I can't remember what it is. I think that would be a possible origin story for Magneto, couldn't it? Because I know the normal one, which I think is actually very compelling, is that he's from but difficult to do in the modern aging as he's aged as a character, which is that he was a concentration camp victim. Because I think that's obviously a brilliant way to start off the whole kind of like what is fundamentally about a kind of racial metaphor, which X-Men really is about, is the idea that instead maybe he was a magnet magnate that somehow in some experiment has then gained all of this power over magnetism, and maybe that changes the character from being a good-natured magnate and then maybe full-blown too much power becomes highly corrupted by, I don't know, maybe something like that.
But to answer the question, I mean, I think
I've just dodged it like a politician completely. I've just explained both options and then hoping that we'll move on without having to answer it.
Yeah, you have to give a good, solid answer. I mean, I think I get a sense of what your answer is going to be at this point. But come on, you've got to spell it out.
Do you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to pick the Magnate, if only because it's fun to say.
Okay. So you can go around saying, I am the Magnate.
Yeah, exactly. It's such like a hype thing to say. You know, you can say like, I'm the Magnate. You know, I'm the Magnate. And it's just quite, it's quite amusing as well. And I'm going to go with that option.
I throw a magnet. It's like a bait to all the people who then I get paid. And then I get laid. Anyway,
yeah, so, exactly. Well, if you want to come up on stage and be my hype woman, that's actually not an option for you to do.
Oh wow! Because this only applies if you actually become a Magnate's Magnate. This does not apply to this is not a job offer for the real world. Just to clarify.
Not right now, but maybe let's talk after the whole thing, because I think actually, maybe that's good. Like I said, the improvisational song abilities are quite stupendous. So I think there's something there, definitely 100%.
Alex asks, have you ever done a radio show?
I have been a guest on quite a lot of different radio shows.
I mean, I think what people are basically saying here is we've had quite a few comments just about the energy that you've got and lots of compliments about your exuberance. That's very kind. I don't know. I just I guess I quite enjoy being in a situation like this where we just get to have a bit of a chat. Aww. a bit of you know, it's good fun. It's a little bit of performance. It's like catching up people in the chat. I must admit, to be honest, I'm a bit of a performer in that thing. I like that. I don't do it formally as an actor or anything, but it's something I've always enjoyed doing as a bit of an amateur thing. One of my favorite things that I enjoy doing in normal times is immersive theatre, which is something I've just discovered recently. And as an audience member or as a actor? Just as an audience member, actually. So, and I'm very fortunate that one of my very good friends is a creator of immersive theatre shows, and actually, he's probably one of the top immersive theatre people in the country, if not globally, actually. So it's an emerging discipline, but the things that they do are absolutely amazing. So, for example, they had this show that I did 18 months ago, went to go along to, called oh God, can I remember the name of it? It is for King and Country, and it was a parallel universe Second World War immersive theatre show where you were playing a group of MPs who've been brought into a bunker while London is being bombed to work out how to repel a German invasion. And the way that it worked is you had to, like, the audience were the MPs, and you had to like give speeches and then be elected to offices, and then you had to go to these different areas within this warehouse that was made up to be like a war room, and then interact with the characters, and then like a whole plot developed. And I was even asked to be a German collaborator. And I was given poison to kill one of the characters, and I had to work out how to poison them. And it was like,
it was mind-blowing in terms of the level of interaction, where this person sidled up to me and said, look, we all know for the benefit of the British people, this war needs to end. And then he slipped me this little thing of like cyanide to give someone. And I was like, what? And then I had to find a way to like work out myself how to get away with that without being noticed. And apparently sometimes the audience members get noticed by the actors, and then they get picked on and different things happen. So like there's like layering of different story things that can happen. And it's this really fascinating fusion of theatre and game. And what I love about it is that even if you aren't a professional actor, if you're just prepared to throw yourself into it as an audience member, the actors will always reward you with the most exciting plot stuff you'll generally get if you're the one who prepared to do the most work as an audience member. So I love those things, because it means that even if I not have to go through lots of formal rehearsals, I still get to enjoy the improvisational joy of participating in something that's like a story we're making together. So I always love that kind of thing anyway. I'd like to do a podcast, actually. It's something I'd like to get around to at some point, but I think I'm just a bit too busy with loads of other bits and bobs at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I do a stream, and the original podcast that I did was very much inspired by Mark Rosewater, where Mark Rosewater does a drive to work, and then that's it. And Mark Rosewater doesn't edit at all. Basically listens to it on the way back home from work. Yeah. And then if it's good, then great. If it's not good, then Mark might re-record it another day. Of course, with the interviews that Mark's been doing recently, because Mark doesn't physically drive to work anymore. And so it's a case of, okay, having this maybe half-hour routine when Mark would be driving to work, instead Mark's either talking solo into a microphone, or nowadays is far more able to get other people in the Wizards of the Coast team to join in. But it's a really nice idea to be just, okay, this is it. It's minimum effort. People are aware of that. And that's what I basically tried to do when I did the board games with Bez, which was something that used to be on Bunkazilla, but I'm going to try and get Jason to put that online maybe when this show actually ends, so people will have some weekly thing to look forward to, obviously when I go anyway. But,
I think it's a great idea. Well, I think it's a good point, is that actually it means that you still can do something without it taking over your whole day, because
exactly.
I guess one of the problems with podcasts is that often a lot of them are very edited, and actually as anyone who's made anything like this before knows, like whether it's a film or it's an audio project, the amount of time editing takes is enormous. So to do it as a stream is really cool, because what you ended up also creating here is like, and it's awesome having joined it again even just a couple of months later since I was last on, is that it is like it feels like a kind of really cool board game morning show. Right, it has that. You absolutely nailed that aspect of it as well. It's so slick. So, but not in a way that, in any sense, that it's like that it's lost its kind of realness or tremendous fun to it. It's just very well done. And I think for that matter, I think it's a smart play. That means you don't have to spend like a whole day each day working on it.
I mean, I've personally been on a couple of local radio shows, which I think were primarily the audience was in Scotland, but it's good fun, and for sure going somewhere and being a guest is quite nice, because you don't need to really do that much of the work. You just, hey, I'm here, and
exactly.
And I would love to be a guest on more podcasts myself, or if anyone else has a Twitch thing and wants to invite me at a reasonable time, considering where I live, and I don't want to necessarily be playing games with people at 2 a.m. in the morning on a stream, it's that mixture of performance and just joy and togetherness. Now Alex says that you have a great voice for radio. Again, Alex is not disparaging your face, but
that's nice.
Dicey Exploits looks forward to the inevitable Magnate immersive experience, where everyone's dressed up maybe in little pinstripe suits, and everyone's complaining to you about putting an airport next to their flats.
Amazing! Oh god, that would be so brilliant. What's really cool about that as well is that I actually that was in the period where things had relaxed a little bit back around August. It was luckily, unfortunately, my birthday. And that's exactly what happened, is that my friends created for me a Magnate immersive experience. And I was blown away. I turned up to, I was sorting some stuff out with my dad. We'd agreed to meet up to sort of some very practical, boring stuff. And suddenly he said, "You've got to watch this video." And I opened it, and my friend who lives in Canada suddenly started telling me about how I was a character from Magnate and that I had to go in and make a load of money at this meeting where we had to go and like redevelop this town. And he was like, and he did this Zoom background that would look really believably like an office. And he was putting on his best like accent and like character as being some sort of like incredibly like high energy American business leader. And then he said to me like, "Right, so you've got to get going." And then my dad was like, "Right, here are your instructions." I turned up to an office building in Croydon, and then I was greeted by like a whole room full of people, my friends, as characters from the like an extended Magnate universe, who then had made like champagne and different things. They were saying, "Oh, please welcome." They gave me like a lanyard for like that I wore for my name, for being from Vector Properties, which is one of the companies. In fact, actually, it's this company from Magnate. And then there was a huge like copy of Magnate sat in the middle of the table, where they'd made their own fan expansion stuff for it as well that I wasn't even aware of, which was kind of awesome. And then we then played a game, but it was like an enhanced story version of Magnate, where they had added loads of extra mechanics and story bits, and there were story beats, and they'd invented like really deep backstories for all the characters who were behind the different companies, including one of them who was like he was like one of the companies. The backstory is that it's an old family business formed by two different families that came together like 50 years previous. And he played the angry son of one of the families, who is like always feels like the other family has the upper hand in the business. Like the level of detail that they went to was just like whoa. It was absolutely awesome. And and it was just a really cool experience. So to be honest, if actually it's possible to create that thing in maybe more scalably for more people, that would be awesome. I would absolutely love to do that.
Yeah, that does sound amazing. And yeah, I agree. You can really feel the love through something like that.
Oh my God. I it brought a tear to my eye. I was just like, oh my God, how have they done this? Like, I was just like, and the fact that they organized it all in secret as well was just the whole thing. Like, it was a lot of work, and it took a whole day that we played it out for. It was incredible.
It's like a personalized convention and everything.
Yeah.
And, for some reason, Alex wants a Magnum. Well, I'm not going to stop you. If, you do what you want.
Yeah, you do you. Go for it.
Okay, so the other question that I want to ask is, and I'm going to stop the questionably quick questions and get to more slower questions, if that's possible, in about 3 minutes. So if anyone in the audience has any, silliness that they want to get into the chat, then feel free to do so for the next 3 minutes-ish. Now, one thing that I would like to ask is, what's the first game you remember playing?
Oh, first game I remember playing. Trying to think about what that would be. Probably the earliest thing I can remember is probably playing a game with my mum, a game simply entitled Dinosaurs, that was about dinosaurs, and it was basically
that's what it says on the tin.
It is what it says on the tin. It was a typical roll and move game where you had to get your dinosaur from one end of the map to the other end of the map, and there was something else to it other than just rolling a dice and then moving. There was like one other mechanic, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. But that probably is my earliest memory. What I do remember about it very strongly is that the board was really quite nice artwork, and the little dinosaurs were like really quite impressive dinosaur miniatures. So they were made of a kind of slightly soft plastic that like isn't like the kind of modern hard plastic that you get for really amazing organic form miniatures that you get all sort of companies produce these days. But it was this quite soft, robust, but quite high detail thing. And that's probably my first memory I think I can think of playing a board game, probably. And of a game in general, if we're not going to include the more broad concept of games, because for me, probably playing on the carpet with my Lego about 3 years old, that's my absolute earliest memory of all time. So so probably the dinosaur game is the first recognizable game, I would say, that I played.
Was it this one?
Oh, no, it wasn't that one. It was a bit flatter than that. It doesn't have that, like, that's really cool though. That's got like a kind of like a sort of 3D panel thing going back. It was, I think, 2-dimensional. There might have been something in the middle of the board that was 3D. Remember there were like caves that your dinosaurs came out of, but they might have been in the part of the 2D artwork, to be honest. I don't think
this vaguely distant memory of maybe dinosaurs, how? Yeah, let's actually, because I said we'd finish up the questionably quick questions. Okay. Let me get that banner up. Put you back into the spotlight.
Oh, back in the spotlight again. Yeah.
Quickly, would you prefer to be a pigeon or a shark for a day?
Pigeon. Definitely.
Books or podcasts?
Podcasts.
Meatball or figurine?
Figurine.
What was the last podcast you listened to?
That last podcast that I listened to, God, what was the last one? I listened to loads of little clips from different things here or there. It's not exactly a podcast, but I guess there's a site that has lots of bizarre, like, interesting little bits of info that you can learn about on, which is called American site called Cheddar. It has some, it's like a YouTube. Yes, it's like a YouTube channel that has like lots of interesting things. And there was a really interesting one about it was just I like these sort of random subjects. It was about New York, and it was about things that are underground New York, and when you go through the layers of it.
New York.
Exactly.
Oh yes.
And it was quite fun, and it was interesting because it was like one of the things that I learned about, which really struck me, is that during the 1930s there was this war between different Chinese triad gangs. And they built between the parts of Chinatown, they constructed a complex tunnel network, and there were gang battles in the tunnel network. So it's like a real life Necromunda kind of style sort of thing. And those tunnels still exist. And they were, I think it might have even been a bit earlier, because they were later used by.
But the point is that there's all this history going on in these tunnels, and everything, it's like strata of information. Literally.
Yes. And it's all.
I think it is literally.
And it's all these and all of the exact literal strata of like story, because you keep going down, and at the bottom of it, there's like there's this enormous underground like road tunnel, like 4-lane road tunnel, which is completely disused. That was like built in the 1960s because they were, they had this plan to like, oh, we don't need public transport anymore. Everything will be cars. And they had this idea they would just obliterate all the historic buildings and build roads everywhere in New York, which got stopped, thankfully. But they actually still half built this underground tunnel. So underneath even the layer of the subway system, there is this gigantic disused 4-lane motorway, like a portion of it, that's never been used, which is just like deep under Manhattan. And these kind of strange things that and it makes you think again about like beneath your feet. Like there is a bit of a lot of it's just ground, but actually there's a bit of a hidden world there that people don't always realize. And I love that sort of thing. So that was the last thing I can remember that I really enjoyed listening to.
That does sound awesome. The last thing that I would like to ask is, why did you agree to come on this show, James?
Why did I agree to come on the show? Because I really enjoyed when I've seen it, and I've really enjoyed. I really enjoyed this. My first appearance was tremendous fun, and we always have a good chat. And I really like the way that you often ask insightful but slightly unconventional questions. And I like that they deliberately just go like, they're not like, right, you don't do like a Jeremy Paxman style interview where you're just like, right, here's the hard hitting stuff, because actually I'm not sure that would benefit anyone. But I do like the question.
I mean, it's interesting because the closest I ever got to that was with the one about pricing structures, which I did with Mark Harris of Tabletopia, which, I think a couple of days beforehand, Mark was like, look, I don't want it to just be me coming on and defending this, and the way that some of these, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't want it to be an antagonistic interview. That even though I could like imagine an interesting interview of, hey, let's go into why does it cost this amount? And the truth is that Mark Harris, being more of a spokesperson and someone who, like, when it's essentially, I know that You've got more collaborators than I do, but it's still pretty much a one-person job. I mean, I could say, hey, James, why exactly does Magnate cost the specific amounts it does? And, you would be more in a position of power you're the one who made that choice. So you should be able to justify it to some extent.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it makes me wonder if I should ask that, but let me kind of wrap up this section and say thank you to everyone who's been asking these questions. Please continue to comment, ask questions. If you haven't already, follow. And now we're going to get a bit more, into what makes James tick, into the game making, into all those things. And a quick shout out to, Bez and Friends Game Day will be going on this particular date. And if you want to follow James's channels, then you can. I will have them already in Facebook and YouTube, and I'm just reposting them there for your convenience.
Nice.
So now, let us get to the main topic, which is, of course, meeting James Naylor. Hello, James Naylor. Do you feel like we have met you?
Nice to meet you.
Do you feel like we ever really know anyone? I mean, I could say getting to know people, but I mean, isn't any kind of podcast, even if it's just, okay, we are going to talk about the type of card finish that you used on your cards, and we could talk about that probably for 2 hours. What's your opinion on linen finish versus satin finish? Whatever, and then talk about I mean, we could learn more about you, because maybe we would learn your ability to dwell on tiny things and how much you think about that particular thing. But, extrapolating is a weird thing. We only learn about people from different snapshots. Do you know what I mean? So do you feel do you feel like anyone really knows you?
The immediate thing I'd come back with to that is also that it presupposes that there is a sort of essential person that remains stable across time. And I think another interesting dimension to this is because I read it, someone sent me something about this literally last night about this topic. And I'll go into that in just a minute, because I think it's an interesting thing about what identity is. And for me, there's also the question of I'm also changing as a person across time. So even if you know who I am 5 years ago, there's probably a degree of sense of similarities. And you'd say, that's good old James. There's things about him that are always going to be the same. But there's actually quite a lot of things about me that also may be different as well. So I think that's partly why getting to know people is is more like a continuous act of discovery than it is a kind of a one and done, or I don't know. Oh, now I know them. Right? It's not. I don't think one can quite do that. But obviously, you can know people better or worse. And I think, to different extents, people.
So what you're suggesting is I think it makes perfect sense. You know someone really well, and then you hear it's in a marriage, the stereotypical "you are not who I married," or I heard it's in a comedy where someone was mutated into werewolf, and it says, I've never had to say this quite so literally, but you are not the person I married.
Exactly.
And even if you're not turning into a werewolf, you do change, and it's I'm going to change. You're going to change. If we didn't, then that suggests that we're just not open to learning and changing, which is incredibly unhealthy.
Exactly. And the reason that the thing that came to me yesterday is a friend of mine sent me an article which I really, really enjoyed, and I can't remember exactly where it was from now, but it was about musical taste. And it was really interesting because she was talking about in the article about this problem of the way that Spotify works is that it's very good at recommending things to you that are like all of the things that you've already heard. And then she talks about how she has this old beaten up car that she drives to work, and that this old beaten up car doesn't have the ability to play anything from her phone it can only play the radio. That's all that she can listen to. So she started to realize that when she's in her car, she has the radio on the top 40 hits kind of things. And she dislikes most of the music. But occasionally there'll be a song that will come on that she'll be like, I like this. And it's like nothing else I've ever listened to, but I really like it. And it reminded her how much, with a previous relationship with music that was more accidental over time, she would consistently get things that were genuinely new pieces of music that would kind of become almost part of her in some sense, because she really loved them, that were different to what she would listen to. But when she was sat in front of Spotify, being constantly shown something about an algorithm, going, well, you like this, so here's even more of this, that actually it was almost like it was her whole musical taste was becoming like a kind of cardboard cutout, simple stereotype version that was being reinforced by the algorithm.
Yeah.
And I think what's fascinating about that is, the immediate thing is, there's a lot of people talk about this, about social media. They talk about, the problem is algorithms, etc. Right? Which I think is an issue. But I think the key thing is that what's behind that? And what's behind that is the assumption, the kind of programmed assumption that, well, you have an essential set of qualities that if we just keep feeding you more of the same, we get to what you really are. But it's like, well, actually what we really are is like, there's a consistency of us across time, and there are things that are really important to us and make us who we are, but actually we're also fundamentally flexible. We evolve, we change as people, in a positive way over time. So I think that's a good example for me of like, actually I don't want to be that same, always exactly the same person. I want to be that person who changes over time.
Yes,
so
100%.
Yeah.
And speaking of music, I think that what I really want is more music in non-common time. So 5/4, not like just 6/8 or 3/4, but like something a wee bit different that manages to, despite the weirdness of its time signature, have a bit of like a catchy beats I know that that Radiohead song, did actually quite a good job of this. It's like, okay, it takes you a little bit more for it to get into, but this is the kind of thing that is that even a tag in Spotify. But like, even if that's what I like, sometimes chuck me something completely different. I would 100% agree. And there's definitely a danger there. And what I really enjoyed was that this morning, shout out to Antoinette Mason for Board Game Inquisition. Antoinette was saying, hey, I listened to this new album from this person, from this band, and doing this, and I was like, okay, I'm going. And someone else was like, hey, that's a great album. And I'm like, well, 2 people have recommended it, I'm going to listen to it. And it's completely different to anything that I've listened to since in the past few months. But it's like this upbeat, trumpet-based big band, like almost it started off like, it was weird. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It started, for the first 2 seconds, I thought it was going to turn into like a heavy metal tune, like Winter Sun, if you know them, or like something with lots of screaming. But it was just really joyous. And then it's like, wow, this is it. And so I listened to their their EP, let's call it. It's like 3 songs, and that was me before popping in here today. And something from a friend, I think that is a really valuable thing. And I love how Gil Hova kind of shares, hey, here's something I've listened to. And I think Dicey Exploit says it's an interesting perspective on the algorithm, not understanding humans and burnout. And the last thing you'd want that to happen to is music constantly being fed the same styles. Exactly. I mean, it's the thing with like board game taste. I mean, do you think like your board game tastes how have your board game tastes shifted? Because you started talking about your first memory of Dinosaurs, the game, and then presumably it was like a big part of your childhood, and then, but at some points you kind of learn, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And then, we start to discover, do you feel like your tastes have shifted over time?
Yes, definitely. I think so. One thing that is pretty consistent about me is that I always am attracted to things that are like hugely complicated. They tend to have loads of parts. I would say that's definitely a big thing for me. So it's not a surprise. I did the component count for Magnate, and I realized it's 812 parts. That's if you count each card as a separate thing. So maybe that's a bit illegitimate, but it's still like, it's pretty massive. And that's very me in some sense, of a consistent thing over time, that I have loved those kind of things with lots and lots and lots of parts. And so my initial instinct when I was getting into games, hobby games, really, I would say things really accelerated for me at university, because that's when I sort of rediscovered games. I think that typical pattern, as a child, you play them, maybe and I invented lots of board games as a child as well. And then you're a teenager, you're playing computer games, board games, these suck, like that kind of thing. And then after that, you're playing, then at university, it's like, there's a tremendous joy of playing a physical tabletop game with people sat around in the same space. And a lot of the games I see the biggest game with the most number of parts and loads of pieces, and that would be what I would be drawn to. And I would try and play those, because that was a lot of the games of my childhood, like had that vibe to them. To me at the time,
so
as
like
a child,
a really big table presence.
Yeah.
Like, all these things. I'm going to play with all these things. I'm going to move these things around.
Yeah, exactly. Here, like those are tiny counters and loads of those things. And what was really interesting was when I started playing the adult versions of those, because I think we've got to remember here that as a child, everything seems like bigger and larger and more copious somehow. So that even a game which to an adult would look at like a game which is, only moderately complex and has a moderate number of pieces, to a child is like, that's huge compared to, playing a card game. So when I started playing the games that as an adult were still the big games, the heavy games, I realized that actually that they were not actually quite for me when I started playing them a lot, because actually I was like, well, actually I'm beginning to find that a lot of these games are actually not just they're not just rich in terms of parts, but they're also truly overcomplicated. Now, you could say that's quite an obvious observation that one could make of those games, but it made me realize that personally what I valued were games that used all of these parts and squeezed a lot of value out of them, because there was still a kind of richness of table presence that will always draw me back. But that actually I would rather play a game that was a little bit simpler as a game, but nailed all of its parts, than something which is there's just like a huge amount of sandbox to play in. And I think that was a good example for me of like where the difference came, and my tastes began to change more as that happened. So it was fortunate that Railroad Tycoon, which is also a big box game full of parts, was also brilliant, and I consistently still feel is brilliant. But is not one that but there were loads of other games that I played, other kind of heavy games that I occasionally pick up and be like, that's cool, but you know what, actually I'd rather probably play something just a little bit more streamlined than this, to be honest. So that's one of the ways in which my taste has changed. I think the other key way that my taste has changed is that I've got more interested in co-op and narrative experiences as time has gone by. I can find myself leaning increasingly in that direction. So things like Eon's End is a really good example. It's not especially narrative, but it's probably the best co-op deck builder I've played, in the sense that it has this really clever, it creates this fascinating dynamic where you are genuinely cooperating about, well, okay, well, if my deck consistently does this, it genuinely contributes to and supports what your deck is doing and interacts with it in a subtle way, which of course in a normal deck building game you're only thinking about how the deck itself is interacting with itself. It's not with someone else's deck in a positive interaction way. It's just you'd only ever be in a competitive game would be something like much more, what's the right way to put it? It's just much more. It's competitive. So you might be thinking, well, how your deck tends to do this, so my one can damage it, or it can beat you by doing this. That's not like the same level of rich interaction space. And yeah, there's Aeon's End right there. Is really cool. How it looks like. Oh, that's another one's got quite a lot of parts all out on the table. But it's really cool how it does that in actually a pretty core, cool, streamlined system. So that one has been really good. And I think in general, with the historic wargaming I already mentioned, with MMR 44, which is effectively a kind of more of a narrative experience in some ways. And I also got into my first online RPG as well in the last few months too. So it's been a strangely rich gaming experience for me the last 9 months, but it's all been things that you can do with a much smaller group of people, or or remotely. That have ended up and much more unusual. Like another thing I've got into is VR, for example, and that's another thing where it's a very different kind of experience. So that's another thing I can feel myself leaning in that way, and that's why I'm really keen to start playing more of this kind of rich narrative experiences and that evolve from game to game, and that's really what I want to get into next.
And Nicholas says that it's pretty valuable. The more exposure you have of a certain type of game, the more you get to reflect about it and learn not only about the game, but about yourself as a player, which then reflects on the game you end up making by positive or negative examples. And Exactly. This is a thing. For me, playing a game with Chris and McCall, we learn about each other. Like, we learned that Chris really enjoys that mathematical deduction, but maybe McCall does a lot of it in their own job and says, to me, this is what I've spent the day doing. and we abandoned code 777, you know, fairly quickly. Sorry, has something happened on your end, or is it just the internet? I'm getting a wee bit of an echo.
Oh, sorry, it shouldn't be.
It might just be. It might just be the internet. In which case, I'll just have to try to.
Yeah, let me have a quick look. It
so
should be.
don't
It
worry
should be
about it.
coming
It's
through
not
my
changed anything.
microphone.
It's just like we've had situations in the past where someone's kind of let their thing get knocked out or something. If that's not happened, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it should be. I think it seems like it's still very much on my microphone, and as long as that's not turned, might turn it down a little bit just so that it doesn't any chance of echo coming through it. But it generally doesn't.
Okay. Anyway, so like, I think it's a really good point about the table presence and your changing perspectives and what Nicholas says about learning about who you are versus your tastes. And as we learn, okay, we like this kind of activity because games are activities, and games I have no echo on my side, says Nicholas. Thank you for letting me know. Great. So it's clearly just me, something to do with the internet. Sometimes it happens. Anyway, the point is that we learn what we appreciate, what we don't appreciate. We learn that some people are really against fiddliness. For some people, we are really competitive. For some people, we would rather almost lose the game in order to make sure that everyone else has a good time and almost avoid conflict, even within the space of a game. Some people enjoy greater amounts of randomness. Some people enjoy greater amounts of strategy. Do you believe that that does reflect your value system as a person?
I think it can do. I think it's very easy to do what was it called, attribution error. So you can look at what people do and think, oh well, they like this kind of thing, so they must be this kind of person. And I think people have often quite complex reasons for having their preferences. And I think what's interesting is that while people are very much shaped by their experience, and they're also and you can see in what they say sometimes an echo or a reflection of maybe of their values. I think it's sometimes really hard to pin it down. What I will say is that it is, however, there are some consistencies. So I think in my experience, it's interesting. One of the things I think about in terms of there seems to be multiple reasons why people dislike randomness in games. And that's been a really fascinating one, playing historic war games, because I think a lot of historic war gamers are quite comfortable with lots of randomness, and they're quite big on dice combat for that reason, because they take the view that, oh, well, crazy things happen in war. Things can just suddenly go wrong and unexpectedly, and it's just painful and difficult. And that's life. There isn't a kind of fairness. Whereas if you take that to a typical Euro gamer, they'd be like, well, hang on, this game is unfair. And they would say, yes, but in this scenario, it was unfairly stacked against these group of people. And I think so that's interesting in terms of what you value. And for some people, I think games are a kind of there is an element where I think for some people games are nice because they're a more controlled world, which are apart from the real. Well, the real world is already full of lots of like random shitty things that can happen to people. So being in a world that actually runs according to the rules, I think can be comforting as well. And sometimes it's just because if things are too random, then they deny you the pleasure of really thinking your way around the problem, because it can become very quickly like it doesn't matter what you do really, and that's a complete denial of agency, which is something again a little bit different to control. So that's a really good example for me about like attitudes to that can come from loads of different places.
I mean, it's also can vary on the day. I'm not going to lie, there's some kinds of things that I would like to try, even though it doesn't sound like a great experience, or at least I would like to try and understand, because earlier on in the shows, maybe a couple of months ago, I was having a conversation about miniatures games where someone was talking about the naval warfare games, where basically in reality, the way it is two ships come against each other and then they're shooting until eventually one of the torpedoes, I don't know, hits a vital point and then the other ship blows up. And basically the way that's reflected in the game is that they'll be sitting there for hours, just rolling dice, taking turns to roll dice until someone gets a 6 followed by a 6, followed by a 6, followed by a 6.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, then the other person's ship blows up, and then it's like, oh wow, that was a great game.
Yeah.
And they've just been sitting there taking turns to see who got lucky first. Which for them, like, if that gives them a sense of visceral excitement, then great. But it doesn't. It's not for me.
Well, I think it's one of the favorite phrases that I think is it's a mantra that myself and Jaya say a lot, because so Jaya collaborates very closely with me. He does he works for me as the lead developer on the kind of projects I'm working on, and actually co-designer on some of the stuff we have in the pipeline. And the thing we have a certain set of things that we always have to remind ourselves of, because I think they're really easy to forget. And one of them, one of my favorite phrases, is that you can't have fun wrong. As long as it's not actually actively hurting anybody, you can't have fun wrong. And I think that's a thing where it's like it sometimes is bizarre to understand it, because you look
without informed consent.
Yes, exactly. It's bizarre to understand it where you watch someone and they're like, they're just, I've rolled 4 6s in a row, therefore, just keep rolling dice. If it really is just that, there's an element of like, oh, I don't get that. But then I don't get, when people go to the casino, right? Because I've been to a casino a couple of times, and it's a sort of place that I thought I might enjoy. And then I went there and I was like, oh, I just this whole experience just feels incredibly flat to me more than anything. Like there's no, because there is no skill in winning the money. There isn't like a roulette table. I had a friend who went for a period where he loved roulette, and he would keep going to the casino and playing roulette. And it was very interesting to see how much he enjoyed the thrill he got off it. Whereas I'm just like, this is a random game with odds slightly stacked towards the house. What's the application of skill? And therefore, where's the fun here? There isn't.
Because you don't feel any involvement, because you don't feel like because of the lack of agency. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think for him, it was just the thrill of, am I going to get this? Am I not going to get this? And how's it going to go? It was interesting, although he'd also constructed a slight idea to himself of the idea that maybe there was a way to play roulette that was smarter or less smart, which I was like, no, I don't think there is. It's because it's random, unlike something like poker. There isn't really anything you can do that's better or worse play in the same way. But that aside, it was like just the thrill of the uncertainty.
Sure.
Was the pleasure.
And actually, there's things like, look, I'm not a fan of the game, but Cards Against Humanity, and lots of people try to say, oh, I've made a better Cards Against Humanity, which actually lets you be a bit more creative. And people don't understand that that's a feature, not a bug. Because for a lot of people, actually having to be creative, doing something like Snake Oil, or Bad Medicine, or Giftable, or insert other game here where you're at, or Fraser also for the L deck, or other game here where you're actually coming up. Say anything. Did I mention that one? Unlike all of these games, the nice thing about Cards Against Humanity, or Apples to Apples for that matter, which obviously Cards Against Humanity is kind of a re-implementation of. The nice thing about those is that it's incredibly low effort. That you just shove your card into the middle and there you go. If what you want from a game is to be able to have people play it, and people enjoy sometimes a bit of abnegation. Like sometimes people feel like, oh my god, in real life I feel too much control and I feel responsible for everything. I'm feeling stressed. Okay, you know what? I just want to go and chill out and roll some dice and see what happens. And that's why you get things like Left, Center, Right, which has absolutely zero decisions in it. You could ask, is it a game or is it not? But it is up on Board Game Geek, so it's, I would say, well, it's within the remits of this conversation, but let's be honest, when have we stuck to board games?
Absolutely.
But, like Left, Center, Right, I'm not saying it's a game that I would choose to play. Like, having said that, I did genuinely play it by choice, because it was like 50 pence somewhere, and I was like, you know what? I should experience this. Let me experience it with Jennifer Witt and Kieran Symington. I think Jennifer is now called Jennifer Sinmington. I really wanted Jennifer to get to Double Barrel's name, but refused. Anyway, but they're now married. Lovely people, lovely couple, wonderful friends. We played left, centre, right, and we were like, yeah, this is not a good game, but hey, here's some pretty gems. And we were also annoyed by the components because, and what we realized is that you know, how many, because it's so popular, it's like those things where you put mouth guards in your mouth, where there's, you know, maybe 5 different publishers doing exactly the same set of rules. Although in those instances, you have to actually write some content of what people have to say. But left, center, right, it's like, you know, there's no content to create. It's, hey, you can't copyright the rules, so hey ho, I'm going to put in my own version. Yeah, it's a weird one where you do, as a designer, I think we need to learn to not only be making games that we enjoy, but what do other people enjoy in the games that we might make.
Yeah, and that one I think has been really fascinating, because that's really interesting you say that, because the current game I am working on has pushed me a little bit in that regard. I don't want to say too much about it at this stage, but it's something I know that, because I'm keeping it kind of a bit under wraps. You've played a version of it. Which I don't want to say anything else about at the moment, if that's okay. But it's been really interesting because it's a hugely lighter game than the kind of game I would typically choose to play in most situations. And that's not to say I don't enjoy quite a lot of light games as well, but I just, because I love things that are quite intricate and have a lot of like multiple things going on in them at once, I would just generally, if I'm the one picking, I'll pick the slightly heavier game. And it's been really interesting for me because it's like forced me to think about how to design against my own typical taste. And like, and I realized I've had to kind of negotiate with it a little bit. Like, it's got to have enough in it that I do really enjoy it to make it an enjoyable exercise for me, but it doesn't need to be the absolute perfect game for me to do what it can do. And I found that hugely useful, actually, and that's been a really good experience, pushing me a little bit. Because I generally, in the same way that I think, you've designed so many different kinds of really excellent light card games. For me, it's like that's definitely that's more unexplored territory for me. So that's been really interesting to do that, I think.
Whereas I've never gotten anything. I've not actually had the chance to play Magnate ever.
No. Yeah.
I've heard good things about it, and well done on all the success.
Thank you.
And let's actually talk a wee bit about that, because I don't normally I deliberately try to not, for the record, I don't want people that I don't know to say, hey, here's a thing that I'm making and let me come on and talk about it for half an hour. And yes, there's a slight difference when it's, obviously there is a history of myself and James. We have chatted in Ludicrous, and we've had some really nice chats. We've chatted online. We've demonstrated games alongside each other, although not as like we've done some playtesting in my house, and so there's a bit of a history and awareness of who each other is. And so for me, this is a, hey James, it was on Gil Hova's show, it was for Tabletop
Gaming Live.
Yeah, that's the one. Gil Hova was like, oh, I'm organizing this and got you involved. And Zach, can you remember their surname?
Oh, Zach. I can't. But Zach made that building game, which was like with the way you constructed a building out of these different parts. Yeah. 3D thing. Yeah. But
anyway, the point being, like, I was kind of the moderator, and that was good fun. And it was like, I kind of have a wee bit of a history with James, and it's like, James, come on again at some points in the future, like next year after I've had my 2 weeks of chaotic stuff, where I will probably be spending one day, I very much inspired by Elaine, just doing a bunch of songs and seeing who gets to guess the board games first. No, Magnate is not food chain Magnate.
It is
Magnate the First City, which is rolling on the bottom. It's a midweight city building property game. And yeah, show us a copy and give us a quick 30-second.
Okay, I'm going to quickly show you. I will show you because this is the current version of the box sample because it's in the middle of being manufactured right now. So this is I'm going to show you. This is the box. So it's a pretty huge box as well. If I do it that way, so that's probably you get a sense of it. It's actually got to get slightly deeper than that in the production version, believe it or not, because it's because of the insert that we've put in it, which is one of these ones that's designed that you can take the trays out and put them around the table, so that it just makes the setup and pack down much more much quicker. So Magnate the First City is a property game where each of the players is a property developer trying to make the most money they can in a city going through a property boom. So plots of land come up randomly for sale in this city that you kind of create out of multiple different neighborhoods that you randomize at the beginning of the game. And then you buy land, you buy this land, you choose what kind of building you want to put up for a range of 4 kinds of buildings. So industry, offices, retail, and homes. And then you try to attract tenants to move into your buildings. So it's sort of deliberately a lot more of a realistic model than most property and city building games are. Because what it's trying to do is it's trying to do something, recreate that world. And the reason why is partly because it's 2 things. Number one, I just think that was a more interesting thematic approach to try and do that. And number 2, it was a thing that I happened to be, for different reasons I won't go into now, was very interested in for a while. And so I'd learned an enormous amount about. So, and by creating those different patterns I hadn't seen done in games before, what I hope would emerge from it is something a bit fresh. Because I'm very much a kind of theme first kind of person, in the sense that I think that my design style is, I like to try and recreate and evoke a theme, and because it will force me into designing new mechanics, because they will like to recreate the theme well will generally require you doing new ways of doing things, because there's just like an unbelievable richness of possibility of theme, and I find, at least for midweight games and up, that works pretty well as a design approach. So that's what the game is about. And then what happens is that you move tenants into your buildings, they pay you rent every round, and then you use the money to reinvest in other buildings. You also sell your buildings for like a big one-off lump sum. You then obviously don't get the rent from them, in order to reinvest. And in the background, the land prices are rising and rising and rising and rising. And eventually they become unsustainable. There's a property market bubble, which crashes, and then the game ends. So what we're also doing in the game is you're constantly kind of pushing your luck, in the sense of when is this market gonna is the market gonna blow up? Should I keep holding on and I can make even more money? And the whole point of it is that it partly puts players in that perspective of like the property developer who's like, oh, but I could make even more if I just stay in. And so it pushes this whole sense of like kind of greed versus caution. Yeah, and I think the thing is that it's deliberately not. I didn't want to make it a heavy-handed satire, because I actually think that I've seen lots of games sometimes do that, and I don't think they do a brilliant job of it if they're like that. But it is a playful satire of that whole world, and what I wanted to do was actually get the players to participate in that, because I think it's more interesting if you just say, "Hey, look, this thing is bad, isn't it?" People go, "Yeah, sure, it's bad." But actually, it's much more interesting if you give the players the same motivations as the real people. And then they have to actually reflect on a bit their own behavior and their own incentives and motivations, which is more interesting. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with it. And I think it's such a familiar story about the property boom, the property bust, that it felt like it was a really strong basis for that as a game. I'm really pleased with it, because it's quite emergent in terms of the way that the cities develop, because there's quite a lot of emergent tactics and strategy come out of how the different where you build and why. And it seems to be very replayable, to the point that I'm still playing it. I don't know how many hundreds of times I've played it, but I'm still always look forward to sitting down and playing a game of it. Like, I've never got
how many you say that you've played it hundreds of times, but have you really played it with the final rule set hundreds of times?
No, definitely not. That has emerged over time. So I can't honestly say that the final rule set is definitely infinitely. Well, nothing is infinitely.
Well, of course, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, sometimes I'm just going to say Rummel one of the games for the LDEC design competition. You know, we had a lot of fun with it, but Chris and Nicole and I played it so many times. I played it with my parents, and they had a bit of fun with it. Not as much as Biddle, but like after a while, it was like, you know, is this a really good game? Or are we just enjoying it because we're enjoying tweaking it? Do you know what I mean? Because quite often we're coming up with, hey, what if we did this? And it's a simple game to tweak and to say, okay, we're going to try this change, try that change. And it is a good game. I'm not saying it's bad, because it wouldn't have gotten past the initial wave if it was actually a bad game. But even, you know, there were some good games I would have, but like, and I don't want to offend anyone who entered, because obviously I value everyone who like puts in the thing, even if it was like straight away cuts, and even if it had like some major flaws, I was like, okay, but you know, it's still, I value all that experience. But then as you're playing something, it's like, am I enjoying this because and then for me, the proof of the pudding is almost once you've started demoing it, because then at that point, if you're actually sitting down for full games, which to be fair, you might not get to do with Magnate, because I imagine when convention starts up again, you'll probably be playing like a couple of turns rather than the full game. I don't know.
Actually, interestingly, we at the conventions we chose pretty much always to play full games because we realized that the tightness of it in terms of how we tried to work out how you could play 2 turns and give a vibe to the game. But every time we played it, that's really unsatisfying, because the mid game has a particular character, the opening has a particular character, and the end game has a particular character. And we felt like we could never create something that captured the true feel of it by doing that. So in the end, we just opted to play full games. We opted either to give people a very quick conceptual demo or a full length game. Just as an example was what I decided to do in the end. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Xates from chat says it looks like a cross between Mega City Oceana and Above and Below based on the cover.
Yeah.
I think seems like a really high praise. 2 great games to compare it to.
Absolutely. I really like both of those, and particularly Above and Below. And I think Above and Below's art style is beautiful. I think that's an absolutely stunning looking game. And yes, the same kind of blue and green color palette. Very much wanted. I think there's a powerful color combination in terms of the sky and the earth. So definitely similar actually there.
I would like to ask you 2 questions. Firstly, actually, let's start with what got you first into design. Have you always been a tinkerer? Like, do you always try to create the things that you love, if you know what I mean?
Yes, that's a really astute question. Very much so. I'm very much the kind of person that, like, if I really enjoy like a subject or like a type of media or something, I'll always be drawn to make my own version of it every time. So, you know, because I was really into films, I tried to be a filmmaker at university, and actually I did end up doing quite a lot of interesting film projects, but decided it wasn't for me really, because the whole process of creation wasn't actually as enjoyable as it could have been, I think, for me. But yeah, you know, read a book. Oh, I got to write a book, or I write a screenplay, or whatever it's going to be. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those, very, very much of that mindset in general.
And then, do you think that what was the first game you started working on? Let's say.
Well,
were you working on things like, as a child, thinking, okay, I'm going to just show these to my parents?
Definitely. So I can't remember all of the games now, but a common thing that I would do would be I would like play a computer game, or I'd watch TV series, read a book, and immediately be like, oh, I want to make the board game version of this. So I remember making a Heroes of Might and Magic 3 board game. But I think before that, I believe it or things, there was a bit where I got really, really into English cathedrals. So I made a game that was about building a medieval cathedral. And I think there is actually one, isn't there? Is it Pillars of the Earth? I think is actually a game that's about that.
It's kind of about that. It's got like a cathedral in the middle that you're building, but it could be anything.
It could just be anything.
It's just basically a turn order marker, if we're being honest.
This one was a kind of more like if anything, an area control thing where you had different dioceses, and you were trying to be the best diocese and construct the most impressive cathedral, something like that. So definitely as a child, I was playing a lot of those kind of things. I was designing a lot of those kind of things, and So I've never played Blizzard the Earth, actually. They've never played it, so more than just thinking about the cathedral in the middle and the kind of theming of it more than anything. I think so I was designing those games as a child. Like, I was really into it, and it only really stopped when I was in my early teens, I think, is when I stopped kind of designing games for a while.
And so, sorry, in your early teens you stopped designing games for a while?
Yeah, I definitely stopped in the early teens.
So when did you pick it up again? Was that just like within the past 5-10 years?
Past 10 years, I would say. So about 10 years ago, so at university, it's about 2007, I started getting into hobby board games at university. So and that's when I first played Railroad Tycoon. It was my first exposure to things, the classic stuff. Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, a lot of things people think of as like the modern hobby games that people get into. It was my first exposure to those, and I loved them. And they were like so much more engaging than the kind of games I'd played when I was a bit younger, in terms of just like, for pretty good reasons, I'd got a bit bored of some of the mainstream games when I was younger, and these ones were like, whoa, these are just really, really well designed, as we know the story. That's really what got me into it again. There was a particular group of friends at university that would meet up all the time to play these games. And again, being exactly as you've identified, the kind of person who immediately wants to make their own something of them. I want to create what I love is a great way to put it. That's immediately what happened then, and I started designing games around then. So would have been about 2008, 2009 that I started some things, but nothing too serious to begin with. Like, I don't think I wasn't like actually aiming to get anything published when I was first designing in like 2009, 2010. It was just really for my own enjoyment.
So, like, at this point, I'm not going to get into why you decided to make Magnate. I don't want it to be, okay, let's examine this game in a lot of detail. I want to ask, what have you learned in the, let's say, last 5-7 years between starting this game and getting to this point where you're about to mass produce it, you're about to send it out into the world for real?
Wow. Well, I mean, that's a big question, because I think it is a very big question. All the things I'm thinking about, like, that I have learned in that time, there's just so much. I think so I'll just start naming things, because I think my knowledge, there's that thing that before you start something, it's very easy to think, I don't know anything about it, and then the moment you start it, you suddenly think, oh, I know 50% of this already, which I believe is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is where you believe that something like a small amount of knowledge is like the worst amount of knowledge someone can have about something, because they'll tend to have hugely inflated ideas about their own knowledge or ability. The amount I know now about designing and making games from when I first started on Magnate, and actually here's something for you. The first rule set for Magnate, I've got it on a Word document on my computer, was written in 2011. So it's actually just past 9 years since the very first version of it. I wrote those rules for the very first time.
So it has been a long time coming for you.
It's been such a long time, and although lots of the intervening years between then and now, I wasn't working on it at all. It's been in the back of my mind since then, and I think and whatever I've learned about the process, so much about design, about for me, like, a big interest has become to really understand, not just like making, oh, that feels good, which is how I would start originally. Oh, I like that. But actually, why do I like that? Why is that? Does this enhance or decrease player agency? To what is the role of risk and the satisfaction of risk in this situation? How much can you load in terms of like interaction space onto a single thing? And like learning, for example, one of the big things I've learned consistently is how much more you can load onto spatial games in terms of complexity than you can onto non-spatial games, which has been really interesting, because then I've subsequently done a load of reading and realized that actually there's some really interesting evolutionary biology that explains that. So there's some really fascinating things around a much more concrete conceptual understanding of how and why people like certain elements of games has been so much richer in that time period. And I now look at things more through that lens, rather than then when it would have just been, I like this. It's now been like, well, interestingly, people tend to like these things or like those things. And I had a really interesting conversation with just through Patreon with Dan Thuro of Space Biff, because he is by far my favorite board game writer. I think the stuff that he writes is amazing. And his Patreon specific post, he does loads of things that are like much broader themes, like how do you present historical conflict in games, and the ethics of that and how that works. I mean, really broad subject matter, which I really enjoy. And we were talking about this, that, the thing that I kept realizing is that I wanted to find people talk about objective board game reviews, and I think this is obviously a nonsense, because you can't really have an objective review of anything. But the realized I was drawn to that concept was I realized it wasn't so much objectivity. It was about, can you make discoveries about games that are like things that consistently over time create certain kinds of positive emotional states. So that's the big thing. The thing for me is I would say I have a much stronger theoretical framework about how to approach game design than I did then. And I'm, once again convinced that 10 years from now, my knowledge, I will look back to there and go, I knew nothing back then. But I still know a lot more now, I think, than I did then. And I think
for sure
that's been one of the biggest things, I think.
I mean, it's a continuous journey, and that's one of the nice things about sort of generating a craft, if you know what I mean. Like honing a craft. I mean, because yes, board games are an art, and you will put some of your own personality into it. You'll put some of your own knowledge and understanding of the world. I mean, I was listening to, I think, Ben Maddox talking with Richard Simpson. Both lovely people. And on Ben's podcast, 5 Games for Doomsday, was talking about what is the nature of art, where Ben proposes that the nature of art is basically to allow a space for humans to explore what is humanity and communicate with other humans and share that humanity for a moment.
Yeah, completely.
And board games absolutely allow that. And but this is not like a thing to convince anyone of, the value of board games, because frankly, if you're here, you are pretty much, I mean,
you don't need to win anyone over on this stream, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. But what I'm trying to say is that yes, there's an artistic side to it. Yes, there's subjectivity. Yes, there's put forward your own life experiences. Make something that only you could make. But at the same time, there is some technical things. Like, I'm not going to say that anything is 100%, but 99% of the time, if your game can fit within, a fairly constrained time, then it is a better game. Like, if this game could take 1 minute, it could take 3 hours, I am going to posit that is a worse game than if you say this game is 10 to 15 minutes, or this game is, I mean, obviously player dependency. Once you get to like a couple of hours, well, it could take 4 hours, because some people might end up just taking twice as long as a normal person. Hey, I was about to shout such a name, but that feels incredibly mean. Some people I've played with are just wow. If you play test a game with them, you know that you've got to. Yeah, the longest ever game of Kitty Cataclysm was 19 minutes, which was with including like the slowest player that I ever known. And so, and then I said that on Board Game Geek, and someone thought I said 90, but I mean 19, just in case it isn't clear. Yeah. I would hate myself if Kitty Cataclysm was 90 minutes. But anyway, that's besides the point. Like, the point is, like, yes, ways of communicating information, ways of what is a sensible negative feedback loop. And in 10 years' time, as you say, I want to ask you, what's your approach on second editions? Do you think that in 10 or even 20 years' time, maybe in 10 years' time with a second edition of Magnate, surely by then there will be multiple printings, but do you think that you will want to say, okay, let's actually re-examine it, let's make a few tweaks, and
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I would say so. I'm definitely of the belief that I'm one of those people who thinks that George Lucas shouldn't keep going back and changing Star Wars. I kind of feel a little bit like I think if a second, whether or not you do a second edition or you just do a different game, to me comes down to a really important factor, which is that if you think that the improvements you're making to the game are genuinely pretty much strictly make it better, because you've had more experience and time to reflect on player experiences, and they don't change the experience of a different kind of experience, they just enhance and tweak and improve and streamline, I think a second edition is a perfectly fine thing to do. Whereas I think if you are making something that really begins to change it into something else, you're better off just making a new game. And I can and if there's a commercial consideration there, I would say make a new game in the same world, in the same series, build on it, so that to build on the recognizability, sure, of the previous title, but make a spin-off, make a don't make something that's the same because it's like you have done that. And the reason why I think that's the case is because what you can end up doing is you end up, for the same reason when you're designing it the first time round, you can end up making something really great and then being like, well, keep tweaking it to the point where you go, well, this new thing is also great, but it's no longer the same experience as before. And one of the rules that I've got in my list of what I'm trying to create is like I said, a theoretical model is like a list of rules that we follow in game design at Naylor Games, is that the goal of a game is to make a game into the best experience it can be, without becoming another kind of experience, which is, I think, something that it's useful to keep focused on. Coming back to always, we have like a design statement that we write for the different things we've got in our pipeline already for, well, what is this game about? What is it doing? And coming back to that and going, hang on a minute, we're tweaking this into something else now. And actually, we could just make a different game at some point that's like that. And if we decide, oh, wow, actually, this new experience is like 100 times more interesting, then maybe we do drop the original project. But I think people can very easily get away from, when you said something very wise about the creativity element of like, am I enjoying it because we're enjoying the process of tweaking? People can end up getting away from the original vision too much. So that's why I would say second editions, you need to make a careful call on that one, I think, personally. So I can imagine a Magnate second edition because there's so many fine balancing things that could potentially be
like potentially add a number here, reduce a number here.
Yeah. Right, and at that point, that's the kind of level where people will go, oh, I really liked it when the so-and-so was a slightly cheaper building. Is like, okay, but we found consistently for 90% of the time it was too cheap or something like that. Sure. But I think if we're talking about, oh, there's got this whole new system in it that does this, or like, oh, now...
Then you're going to have an expansion or something, or...
another...
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable way that you've put it. So the notion of trying to not get away too much from the original. I mean, look, it's my show. I'm trying to get over the guilt of constantly talking about it. But yeah, I mean, here's it's Netherlands. I can't remember what I should. Is that Dutch? Netherlands is Dutch.
This is a Dutch yogi.
Yeah, this is a Dutch yogi, as opposed to the 20 other versions of yogi that I've got to the left of me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just showing off now. This is a TR Trinidad. I don't know what TR is, but anyway. So yogi. I'm going to say that there was 1.5 cards changed between Innerbind and yogi. Now, one of them was because it was a misprint. One of them it was just because, okay, this one card, right hand, right of right elbow. So the idea is that you put your right hand to the right of your right elbow. Right, sometimes you need something to touch your face. And so if you need that, then you need to kind of get your elbow in. And that is actually quite an interesting contortion challenge. It's actually quite a good pose.
Saying that. Yeah.
But, but I took out that card because it takes people a few seconds to understand. And sometimes if someone was drunk or if someone was having learning difficulties, it was really painful to watch. And that's just something that I discovered after it was already printed.
Yeah.
And I mean, out of I want to say 54 cards, 55, I think it was 55, and there was one blank. So because Carta Mundi prints on a 56 card sheet. Anyway, the point is, like, out of 55 cards, I changed 1.5 of them. It's not a massive change. It's like 3%. But having right hand above left hand, that's just so much simpler. It's more in keeping with the game. Now, same thing with Wibble. Like with Wibble, I discovered, hey, it's better if you refresh at 3 rather than 4.
Yeah.
And with Fable, hey, it's better if you have 4 story elements. And I'm actually, once I am able to talk to more people in real life, I would like to explore the notion of having just 3 story elements as a core rule. Currently, 3 is a variant, 4 is the default. And I say, 5, well, what was I even thinking back in those days? That's like too much of a memory thing. And I'm able to remember it, but not everyone else is. You learn things. You watch it being demoed. You watch it being played in pubs or whatever. You hear people saying things. And thanks to Antoinette Mason, Kitty Cataclysm, I would at some point, if I can find the energy, like to do a reprint, but it won't just be a straight up reprint, because for sure, and I had big discussions with David Brain, who is amazing, and being like, okay, we've chatted about these cards that maybe they shouldn't be worth 3 points, they should be worth 2 points, and how many of each of these cards should there be? And in the end, I have changed, I want to say, 5 cards in the deck. I've not added anything new. It's just kind of changing a 3 into a 2, or adding this card. It used to have 2 copies, now it has 3. This other card, it used to have 2 copies, now it has 1. Because like learning what people are enjoying, learning how things feel, hearing other points of view, and also having that extra mind space to think about it. And so I know that there's a lot of people who can get up in arms, like saying, oh my god, Pandemic, you made a new edition and all my old expansions aren't going to work, or the new expansions aren't going to work for my old edition, how dare you? Which I can sort of understand, okay, incompatibility, but if it's like Flash Duel by Dave Serlin, what, you brought out a new version? Well, it doesn't reduce the quality of your first edition at all. It's just a strict improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more.
So it sounds like we're both fairly agreed. I think that it is unfortunately about time to start wrapping up.
No worries.
Is there anything that you would like to say to anyone? And like, obviously, we've talked a lot. Let me actually do the whole recap thing down here. Because we have talked about quite a bit of stuff. If I get my notes, we have talked about.
Yeah, it feels like we've gone through a lot of.
We've talked about Biddle, Invisible, Point Salad, Cats, and the joy of sharing, the history via board games with your dad. Christmas decorations, doing things for yourself, not just for other people, doing things in a small way if that's what suits you. Solo board gaming, Everdell, video games like Civilization, Eon's End, Railroad Tycoon, having lots of little bits, Magneto versus
Magnate,
and all the racial metaphors that you might have, immersive theater. Oh, I didn't tell you that. True story. I used to date a person who was in that Star Wars secret cinema.
Ah, okay, right.
And so I got a free ticket to that, which was really awesome, because I would not have been able to afford to go there. But that was really nice. And we talked about friends doing amazing parties for us and being surprised. We talked about James's origins, like playing Dinosaurs the game. I mean, I don't mean origins as in, how babies are made. That's a totally separate.
No, but I like the idea of that's like part of my comic book origin story, because those are very popular now. So I'm a big fan of that. That's good.
We talked about a bit about the strata on information in New York, about identity, about changing your opinions, about having big pieces, about lots of pieces, about the perspectives of children versus adults, about randomness, about how games affect our roles and ourselves, about how games and also reflect who we are. We talked about you can't have fun wrong. games we might not enjoy but need to understand the positives of, and designing for people who are not you. We talked about a bit more about Magnate. We talked about playing a full game for the demo, and we didn't really explore any of this in full detail, but we talked about quite a bit. We talked about spatial stuff aiding understanding. Obviously, if you've got those little bits, then pictures, space, where things, this is all ways that things can be, and also the shapes of things, the size of things. We talked about making second editions, whether it's strictly better or a different experience. And I love what James said about make something the best it can be without being a different kind of experience, and having that sort of vision and staying true to that vision. And then I asked, James, origin stories involve Magnates, right?
100%. Yeah, they've got to now. Well, I mean, even after this conversation, they just have to work out a good narrative for that.
And then after we talked about making things the best it can be, then I suggested that we start wrapping up, and then I did wrap up. And that brings us to the present moment.
Which gets amusingly recursive then, as an effect, which is...
And, and now I'm kind of talking about... And we're talking about right now.
And now I'm talking about...
And now I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at you laugh. And
exactly.
Oh, also... I should mention a side conversation that was happening in the chat with, Rob, I like that, with Xate and Alex kind of dueling each other for the new point system that I've got, that I'm going to try and sort out in the next couple of days. To sort out some sorts of rewards. I don't know what they'll be, some sort of thing for Christmas when I've hopefully got my keyboard out and I'll play music on demand. I will let people pick a song, and then I will play it. I'll probably play it really badly, but I will attempt it.
Got to do some kind of points. Got to do something for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Points mean songs? I don't know.
I don't know.
Songs mean embarrass Bez. Like, get Bez to do potentially embarrassing things, like playing songs probably badly. And hello, Claire Llewellyn. It's lovely to see you, and thank you very much for joining along. We are just wrapping up. And so, yes, if you want to find me, I am on stuffwithbez.com, stuffwithbez.com, twitter.com/stuffwithbez, instagram.com/stuffwithbez, and I'm twitching or streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook at 10 a.m. UK time every day. And YouTube is the best place for the old episodes where it goes back. This is like the episode 230. Discord, go to stuffwithbez.com/Discord, and that will take you to the thing. Feel free to share ideas for new topics and stuff. And apparently I do the embarrassing stuff, really. I don't think that's true. Like, if it comes to music, if you actually wanted me to play a particular song and learn it at the time, then I don't know if I would kind of be willing to do that regularly. So points are a way for me to get people to kind of treasure that and be like, okay, this is something that I really want you to do, if you know what I mean. And yeah, it is live. Don't worry, you're all good. It's lovely to see you. And Claire Llewellyn plays amazing music, and I found them a few weeks ago. And maybe I can do my new thing, which is I do, if I can. But James, I should actually go to thank you everyone, including James, and I will share your links in just a second. But
thank you very much.
Over to you. What are you up to? You can share anything you want to. And so share anything that you're looking forward to doing after this show. Are you looking forward to having some food? Are you looking forward to trying to get something achieved? Are you going to, I don't know. What are you up to, James?
Oh, well, I'm going to be having definitely some lunch quite shortly, which I look forward to immensely, because I fast in the mornings. So I don't get any food till January 12 or 1. So I'm going to be doing that. And then the other thing I'm looking forward to is I've actually had discussions with my factory today, which I'm not that much looking forward to be honest. But at least we'll get some things resolved around some different bits of the project that have to get finished. So that's my fun day coming up. Food and manufacturing. That's what I'm going to be up to. But I've also got some cool design chat later on with Jaya, where we're going to have a Zoom call where we're going to be discussing some really interesting things for a game we're working on.
Oh, that does sound amazing. And I'm just sharing the links over on all the media for James again. So please do check those out. I am personally going to be getting tested for COVID in 2.5 hours. I've no reason to believe that I have it. Don't worry. I'm all good. But I am getting a proper, private test. It's because, on the NHS, you're meant to do it under certain circumstances. But of course, the NHS only has so many capabilities. And so if you want to do something that's kind of a bit frivolous, like going to see your family for a few weeks for Christmas, then you need to get tested privately. And so I'm getting tested to then go up to Glasgow, which is where I will have a lot fewer board games. So my stream will be continuing every morning, but I will not be reviewing necessarily board games every Sunday, but I will be reviewing something, maybe comics. Maybe I'll start reviewing all the things I have with me in Glasgow. Maybe I'll review my SNES games. Who knows?
Do it.
I probably have a bigger SNES collection than you. I mean, guess how many games I have?
30.
More.
100.
More.
200?
Maybe a bit more. But pretty close.
250.
Ish. Like, I don't know the exact number, but it's in the 200-300s kind of.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I have a collection of 0. So
I am a big fangirl of the SNES. I just love, Super Nintendo. Uni Rally is personally my favorite game. Super Aleste, I love it. I adore it. I do have a soft spot for Secrets of Mana. And even though I have all the Final Fantasies on the SNES and, some of the... I finished Chrono Trigger, and it is a good game, but it's not... Like, is it... I have a thing against the grinding. Do you know what I mean? Like all those random battles. It's like, what does this really add to the game? Do you know what I mean? I never felt like that was something. But, hey, and so thank you, Xate, for explaining what today I'm doing. And, yep, everyone, you are so lovely. And Claire Llewellyn, it's lovely to have you over here. And, what else are we up to? Oh yeah, for my next streams, look at stuffbabez.com/streams. Tomorrow on Friday, I am going to do what I call my Friendly Friday Forum, which is every week there is just unstructured chaos, and everyone is welcome to join me on camera. So I literally paste a link. So it's all browser-based. You just click the link in Twitch, and then as long as I know you, I will let you into the studio. So if I know your name, it's like, hey, brilliant, it's this person. And then we can chat about how we are, any games we've played, what we've been up to, and just, shoot the breeze, figuratively speaking. I don't know anyone who literally shoots the breeze. That would be a really weird thing to do.
It wouldn't achieve very much.
I mean, the bullets would just literally go through the breeze.
Just go through the air. There's nothing.
Yeah. I mean, if you were shooting a tornado,
wouldn't do it. Can you shoot a tornado? I mean, would that help either? I think the bullets.
It would just. I think. Imagine that you'd just get lots of bullets going round and round in the tornado.
Well, according to that documentary that I saw, that happens with sharks. So, so yeah, I can only assume the same thing with bullets.
Okay. We've got one final question. So we've got about 7 minutes before we have to wrap up. So. Best family board game. What shall I get for Christmas? I mean, I've got a couple of answers that I'm clearly biased about. Where's my English version? Here's the Japanese one. I've got the English version, but it's over there. But I would suggest getting Yogi, which is a game of physical contortion where the cards say things like one finger touching nose, one finger touching ear, two hands touching, hand on a knee. And then you have to still manage to draw your next card, which it gets harder and harder and more ridiculous.
I will particularly endorse that one. I've actually bought that one a couple of times as Christmas gifts because I think it's tremendously accessible and So yeah, definitely. You can always. I feel like one can. It's one play with basically anyone, which is great.
Oh, and Rob also recommends it. I've still not played The Crew, but that I have heard so much good about it. And yeah, I love anything that will make you laugh in the game. I would, yep, Yogi. Honestly, like I've also got. I was going to suggest a special thing, but I can't go to the post office anymore. I've got to actually close my shop today because after I get tested, I can't be going out because that would defeat the whole point of being tested. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Kitty Cataclysm from me, if you like puns, says Xate. I do not have any copies of that for sale, but you might be able to get it online. I don't know if Ludicrous has any. From me.
May do. I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I was down there a couple of days ago, but I don't know if it does or not. What I was going to recommend that I think is good, that's stocked by a lot of different places, is the Mind. I still think, and I know that was very big a couple of years ago, but actually I still think is a really good game. I mean, you can exhaust it a bit with the same people quite easily, but I would say that if you've got people who've not played it before, that's another very simple but really accessible game that you can play with a group of people that's like not like anything else you probably ever played, which I think is also very clever about it. Yeah,
the Mind is amazing. I would 100% agree with that. And hey, there we go. I have found at Ludicrous, Kitty Cataclysm is also sold out. But according to board game prices, there are 2 places where it is still available, and I will place them in. Hopefully that works out. I see that there's a whole source. You probably don't need that, so I will just delete that bit. Okay, there we go. Both of those things should work. So yeah, but the Mind 100%. That's a great game about trying to guess. I actually wrote a song about it, which I was going to do the songs for people guessing what I'm singing about. So now you might know one of the games if you turn up on the day when I sing. I might do just like a different song like every day from like Sunday onwards or Monday onwards. I don't know.
Do it.
It's like about a different game, and it's like every day it's be like, hey, here's a game, guess what game it is. And yeah, but the Mind is not a great game, says Xate. Also
controversial.
Oh wow, instead of guessing what you're talking about. Oh Rob, you wag. Okay, in all seriousness, lots of love to everyone. Again, like the banner is constantly saying, feel free to share anything. What else am I looking forward to? I am looking forward to hopefully knowing that I don't have COVID. I'm looking forward to doing a wee bit more writing of rules. I'm looking forward to tidying up. This is more of I'm looking forward to having done it. I'm not looking forward to the actual tidying. I'm looking forward to having done the tidying and getting things from the living room into my room, so I have literally nothing in the public spaces, so that's when I go away, I can do so with a clear conscience. And yeah, I will have like about 20 Calyx cubes of board games, but like, if people want to play them, they can. And like, before then it was just like a flat wall with nothing on it, so I don't feel too bad about them being there. They're not like using that much space. It's really the boxes in front of there that I feel embarrassed about, because I might potentially have a bit of stock that I never actually put into the attic, which was really bad of me. But anyway, we've got Rob going off to have a curry with a couple of colleagues actually over Zoom. Curry's always good. Oh my gosh, you know what? I am excited to say that I have, after this show, I am going to go to Sainsbury's for the final time until I get up. So just doing some small amounts of shopping to last me until Saturday afternoon when I do actually go to Glasgow. And so, yes, enjoy that thing. And Alex is going to be stuffing envelopes, presumably with Christmas cards, given that Alex is going to be writing late arrival apologies. Sorry, I'm just laughing at this. Please email to Curry or the Discord. I'll print it out and enjoy it for lunch. Oh, so love.
Amazing.
And yeah, lots of love, everyone. I want to say thank you. And I hate kind of leaving because it's like, this is so much fun. Again, I've already said it, but thank you, James. You have been wonderful. Thank you for joining me.
It has been an absolute pleasure, and it's been absolutely delightful. It's tremendously enjoyable.
And thank you, everyone watching. You are such wonderful people. Oh, and I see that. I know we normally read Idol Michael, but I really want to go and support Appalach. So I'm going to type in raid, #raid, Appalach. There we go. And so this is a musician who is the other half of Lauren Joy Malarvey, who we were speaking to yesterday. And I want to, that's basically it for now. The only thing left to do is to please share, spread the word, raid if you want to. And for now, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.